Two identical twin girls, dirty and starving, saved a millionaire from a brutal robbery. When he asked how he could reward them, they made a request that left him in tears. They wanted to meet his deceased wife. What they revealed next changed his life forever. Leave your like to keep following the next videos, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more amazing stories like this one. Maxwell Thompson stared at his reflection in the polished elevator doors of Thompson Enterprises, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed man staring back at him. 5 years had passed since Sarah's death, but the weight of her absence still crushed him daily. The billion-dollar empire he'd built meant nothing without her to share it with. The December wind bit through his expensive coat as he left the building. He'd started walking home these days, despite owning a fleet of luxury cars. The cold helped numb the pain, if only temporarily. His security team hated it, but he dismissed them months ago. What was the point of protection when he had nothing left to live for? The streets of New York grew darker and emptier as he wandered into an unfamiliar neighborhood. The pristine sidewalks of Manhattan's financial district gave way to cracked concrete and overflowing dumpsters. He should have turned back, but something kept him walking forward, deeper into the shadows. A rough voice broke through his thoughts. "Nice watch, mister." 3 men emerged from an alley, one holding a knife that gleamed dully in the fading light. Maxwell didn't move. Perhaps this was what he'd been unconsciously seeking all these months. "Just take it," he said flatly, holding out his wrist. The watch had been Sarah's last gift to him. Maybe losing it would finally sever his last connection to her. The knife wielder grinned, revealing missing teeth. "Oh, we'll take more than that." His companions moved to surround Maxwell, their intentions clear in their predatory stance. Maxwell closed his eyes, waiting for what would come next. But instead of pain, he heard quick footsteps and sudden shouts of surprise. His eyes snapped open to see 2 small figures darting between his attackers with surprising agility. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if choreographed. One knocked the knife from the leader's hand, while the other tangled his feet with what looked like a length of rope. The man went down hard. His companions, caught off guard by the unexpected intervention, hesitated just long enough for the smaller figures to create chaos. One attacker tripped over a suddenly appearing stick, while the other received a face full of what appeared to be dirt or sand. Within moments, all 3 men were fleeing, cursing and stumbling in the darkness. Maxwell stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he made out his saviors. 2 girls, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, identical down to their ragged clothes and tangled dark hair. They were painfully thin, their faces smudged with dirt, but their eyes blazed with an intelligence that caught him off guard. "You shouldn't be here," one of them said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't quite place. "It's not safe." "You saved my life," Maxwell responded, still stunned. "Let me help you. I can give you money, food, whatever you need." The girls exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire conversation. Then the second one spoke, her voice identical to her sister's. "We don't want money." "Then what? Please let me do something to repay you." Another silent exchange between the twins. Finally, they turned to him in unison. "We want to meet your wife." Maxwell felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. "My wife? How do you—" "Sarah," the first twin said softly. "We want to meet Sarah." The world seemed to tilt beneath Maxwell's feet. He hadn't spoken Sarah's name aloud in years, had done everything possible to erase her public connection to him after her death. These girls couldn't possibly know about her. "Sarah's dead," he said harshly, the words scraping his throat like broken glass. "She's been dead for 5 years. The twins didn't seem surprised by this information. If anything, their expressions grew more determined. "We know," said the second twin. "We still need to meet her." Before Maxwell could respond, they melted into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared, leaving him alone with his confusion and a rising tide of questions. How did they know about Sarah? What did they mean by wanting to meet her? And why did he have the unsettling feeling that these 2 homeless girls held answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask? He found himself walking home in a daze, his mind replaying every detail of the encounter. The girls' movements had been too practiced, too coordinated for street children. And their eyes, there had been something familiar in them, something that tugged at memories he'd tried to bury. When he reached his penthouse, Maxwell went straight to his private study. He hadn't opened the wall safe behind his desk since the day after Sarah's funeral, but tonight his hands moved automatically to the combination lock. Inside lay a single envelope, sealed with wax and bearing his name in Sarah's elegant handwriting. "Open this when you're ready to live again," she had written across the front. For 5 years, he hadn't been ready. But as he stared at the envelope now, his hands trembling slightly, Maxwell couldn't shake the feeling that those two mysterious girls had set something in motion that he couldn't stop, even if he wanted to. He broke the seal, pulled out the letter, and began to read. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his face, and he knew with terrible certainty that he had to find those twins again, no matter what it took. Maxwell hadn't slept. Sarah's letter lay open on his desk, its contents burning in his mind. "There are things you don't know, my love," she had written, "secrets I kept to protect you. When the time comes, you'll understand why." The letter mentioned twins, not by name, but the reference was unmistakable now. Sarah had known about them, had been protecting them. But from what? Dawn found him back in the neighborhood where he'd encountered the girls, this time accompanied by his most trusted security officer, James. The streets looked different in the pale morning light, but no less desperate. Homeless people huddled in doorways, turning away from his expensive clothes and searching gaze. "Mr. Thompson," James said quietly, "this isn't safe. Let me bring in a team to search for the girls." Maxwell shook his head. "They'll disappear if we do that. They're too smart, too careful." He approached an elderly woman sorting through a shopping cart filled with cans. "Excuse me, I'm looking for twin girls around 12 years old. Dark hair, dark eyes. Have you seen them?" The woman's weathered face closed off immediately. "Ain't seen no twins," she muttered, hurrying away with her cart. This pattern repeated throughout the morning. Everyone they approached either claimed ignorance or quickly disappeared. It was clear the homeless community was protecting the girls, but why? By afternoon, Maxwell was exhausted and frustrated. They'd found no trace of the twins, though he felt eyes watching them from every shadow. He was about to suggest they try again tomorrow when a small boy tugged at his coat. "Mister," the child whispered, glancing nervously around, "Lucy wants to talk to you about the sisters." The boy led them to a soup kitchen 3 blocks away. Inside, an older woman with steel-grey hair tied back in a severe bun was stirring an enormous pot of something that smelled like vegetable soup. She didn't look up as they entered. "Sending your watchdogs around frightens people," she said by way of greeting. "The girls don't need that kind of attention." "You know them?" Maxwell moved closer, hope rising in his chest. Lucy finally looked at him, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Everyone here knows them. Emma and Grace. They've been on these streets for 2 years, ever since they escaped." "Escaped?" James took a step forward, but Maxwell held up a hand to stop him. "From what?" Lucy's expression darkened. "That's their story to tell, if they choose to. But I will say this, those girls have survived things that would break most adults. They trust no one except each other. The fact that they approached you at all is..." She paused, studying Maxwell's face. "Interesting. They knew about my wife," Maxwell said quietly. "How could they know about Sarah?" Something flickered in Lucy's eyes. Recognition. Fear. But her voice remained steady. "Like I said, that's their story. I just feed them when they come by. Speaking of which," she turned back to her pot, "they usually stop in around sunset if you want to wait." Maxwell glanced at his watch. 4 hours until sunset. "I'll wait." Lucy nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. "Your man should wait outside. The girls won't come if they think they're being trapped." James started to protest, but Maxwell cut him off. "It's fine. Wait in the car." After James left, Lucy poured Maxwell a bowl of soup and pointed him to a corner table. "Might as well eat while you wait. And Mr. Thompson, if you're planning to hurt those girls in any way—" "I want to help them," Maxwell interrupted. "They saved my life, and somehow they're connected to my wife. I need to understand how." Lucy's face softened slightly. "Sometimes understanding brings more pain than comfort. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Before Maxwell could answer, the soup kitchen's door opened and a stream of homeless people began filing in for the evening meal. Lucy turned away to serve them, leaving Maxwell alone with his thoughts and cooling soup. Hours passed. The crowd thinned as darkness fell outside. Maxwell's hope began to fade. Perhaps the girls had been warned away. Perhaps... The door opened one final time. Emma and Grace slipped in like shadows, moving with that same uncanny synchronization he remembered. They showed no surprise at seeing him there. "You read the letter," Emma said. "It wasn't a question." Maxwell nodded slowly. "How did you know I would?" "Because we knew Sarah," Grace replied, "and Sarah knew you would find us when you were ready." The simplicity of their statement hit Maxwell like a physical blow. "How? When?" "Sarah died 5 years ago. You would have been 7, Emma finished. "We were 7 when she found us, when she promised to protect us, when she—" The girl's voice broke slightly. Grace took her sister's hand. "When she died trying to keep that promise." Maxwell felt the room spin around him. "What are you saying?" "Sarah didn't die in an accident," Emma said, her young face aged by grief and knowledge no child should possess. "She was murdered. And the people who killed her? They're still looking for us." Lucy appeared suddenly behind the twins, her face grim. "You should show him," she said softly. The girls exchanged one of their silent looks, then reached into their tattered coats. Each pulled out an identical locket. Inside each was a photo, Sarah smiling, with 2 small, well-dressed girls Maxwell had never seen before. "Who are you?" he whispered, though part of him already knew the answer would shatter his world completely. "We're the daughters of the man who killed your wife," Emma said, her voice trembling, "and we have proof of everything." Maxwell sat in Lucy's small office behind the soup kitchen, his hands shaking as he examined the documents Emma and Grace had carefully preserved in a waterproof bag. Birth certificates, photographs, and most damning of all, a USB drive Sarah had given them before her death. The girls watched him with identical expressions of apprehension. "Richard Blackwood," Maxwell read aloud, the name bitter on his tongue. "Your father was my chief financial officer." "Is," Grace corrected quietly. "He's still alive, still looking for us." Maxwell remembered Richard's grief at Sarah's funeral, the tears that had seemed so genuine at the time. The man had even delivered a eulogy, speaking of Sarah's kindness and how she'd mentored his daughters after their mother's death. All lies. "Tell me everything," Maxwell said, his voice rough with emotion. "From the beginning." Emma spoke first, her words careful and measured. "Our mother didn't die of cancer like everyone was told. She found out what Dad was doing at your company, the fake accounts, the missing money, all of it. She was going to expose him. So he killed her," Grace continued, picking up the story seamlessly. "Made it look like her illness had taken a sudden turn. We were 6. Too young to understand, but old enough to remember things that didn't make sense." "Sarah figured it out," Emma said, tears welling in her eyes. "She was reviewing the company's old financial records and found discrepancies, started asking questions. Then she noticed how we flinched whenever Dad came near us, how we never spoke about Mom." Maxwell closed his eyes, remembering how Sarah had suddenly taken an interest in Richard's daughters, inviting them to the house for tutoring sessions. He'd thought she was just being kind, filling the void of their own childlessness with surrogate maternal affection. "She built a case," Grace explained. "Gathered evidence about both crimes, Mom's murder and the financial fraud. But Dad realized what she was doing. The night she..." Grace's voice broke. "The night she died," Emma continued, squeezing her sister's hand. "She was supposed to meet with federal investigators. She never made it to the meeting. Instead, she came to our house, desperate. Said we weren't safe, that she had to get us out. We were throwing clothes in backpacks when we heard Dad come home early. Sarah hid us in the attic crawl space," Grace whispered. "Made us promise not to make a sound no matter what we heard. She said she'd lead him away, then come back for us. We heard them arguing, heard them leave, heard—" "The crash was on the news an hour later," Emma finished. "They said Sarah lost control of her car on the mountain road. But we knew. We heard Dad come home later, heard him making phone calls, laughing." Maxwell felt sick. The police investigation had ruled it an accident, wet roads, mechanical failure. He'd never questioned it, too lost in his grief to look deeper. "Why didn't you tell someone?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Who would believe two little girls over a respected businessman?" Grace asked bitterly. "Dad told everyone we were traumatized by Sarah's death, that we were making up stories. He had us committed to a special school for troubled children. Really, it was more like a prison. We escaped 2 years ago," Emma said. "Had to split up at first to confuse the people looking for us. Found each other again here in the city. Lucy's been helping us stay hidden, but they're getting closer," Lucy interjected from the doorway. "Richard's men have been asking questions in the neighborhood this past month. That's why the girls risked approaching you last night. They need help, Mr. Thompson, real help." Maxwell stared at the USB drive in his hands. "What's on this?" "Everything," Grace said simply. "Sarah's research, recordings, proof of both murders. But we could never access it. It's encrypted, and the password would be something only I would know," Maxwell finished. His hands were steady now, his mind clearing with terrible purpose. "Lucy, is there a computer we can use?" The old woman nodded toward a dated desktop in the corner. "It's not much, but it works." Maxwell plugged in the drive with trembling fingers. A single password prompt appeared on the screen. He typed in the phrase Sarah had used in her letter to him. "When you're ready to live again." The drive unlocked. Folders appeared, meticulously organized in Sarah's precise way. Financial records, audio recordings, photographs, and a video file dated the day she died. Maxwell clicked play, and suddenly Sarah's face filled the screen. She looked tired, worried, but determined. "Max, my love," she began, "if you're watching this, then I'm dead, and you finally found our girls." "Our girls?" Maxwell whispered. "Yes," Sarah continued, as if answering him across the years. "Emma and Grace aren't Richard's daughters. Their mother, Claire, was my sister." The twins gasped in unison. Maxwell felt the world tilt beneath him as Sarah's voice continued, revealing a truth that would change everything and put all their lives in even greater danger. The video continued playing as Sarah's words shattered everything the twins thought they knew about themselves. "Claire was my younger sister, but few people knew about her. Our parents separated when we were young. I stayed with Dad in New York, while she went with Mom to London. We kept in touch secretly, but lived separate lives. Then Claire met Richard." Maxwell watched the twins' faces as they learned the truth about their origins. They sat perfectly still, hands clasped together, tears streaming silently down their cheeks. "Claire knew Richard was dangerous long before she had proof," Sarah continued from the screen. "She tried to leave him when she was pregnant, but he threatened her. Said he'd make sure she never saw her babies if she left. So she stayed, documented everything and planned her escape, but she waited too long. Suddenly a noise from outside the office made Lucy straighten. "Someone's here," she whispered. "The kitchen should be empty now." James burst through the door before they could move. "Sir, we've got trouble. Black SUVs just pulled up outside. Armed men." Maxwell's security training kicked in. "Is there another way out?" Lucy was already moving, pulling aside a shelf to reveal a narrow door. Through the pantry, there's a service tunnel that connects to the old subway maintenance system. The girls know the way. Come with us, Maxwell said to Lucy, but she shook her head. I'll stall them. Give you time. Just promise me you'll protect them. They're all we have left of both Claire and Sarah. Emma started to protest, but Lucy cut her off. Go, now! They slipped through the door, just as heavy footsteps entered the soup kitchen. Grace led the way through the darkness, their path lit only by James's phone flashlight. Behind them they heard Lucy's voice, loud and angry. You can't come barging in here. This is a charitable establishment. A man's voice responded, one that made the twins freeze in terror. Search everything. They're here somewhere. I want my daughters found. He's here himself, Emma whispered, trembling. Dad never does his own dirty work unless it's too important to trust to anyone else, Grace finished. They moved faster through the tunnel, the sounds from above fading. Maxwell's mind raced as they walked, processing everything from Sarah's video. There was more on that drive. Proof of Richard's crimes, enough to destroy him, but they'd had to leave it behind. Wait, he said suddenly. The drive, Lucy has it. If they find it, they won't, Grace said with quiet certainty. Lucy knows what to do. She's been preparing for this for 2 years. They emerged into an abandoned subway maintenance room 20 minutes later. James immediately checked his phone. No signal down here. We need to get somewhere safe. Call in resources. Not your penthouse, Emma said quickly. That's the first place they'll look. Maxwell nodded. I have a safe house in Brooklyn. Old brownstone, under a different name. Sarah insisted we keep it. Now I know why. The journey through the tunnels and back to the surface was tense. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every distant sound made the twins grab each other's hands tighter. When they finally emerged onto a quiet street 6 blocks from the soup kitchen, James hot-wired an abandoned car, a skill Maxwell hadn't known his security chief possessed. Sometimes honest methods aren't enough, James said grimly as they drove through back streets toward Brooklyn, especially when protecting family. Family. The word hit Maxwell hard. These girls, Sarah's nieces, Claire's daughters, were the closest thing to family he had left, and they'd been suffering alone for years while he'd wallowed in his grief. The safe house was exactly as he remembered it, modest but secure, with reinforced doors and windows. Inside, the twins did a perimeter check with practiced efficiency that broke Maxwell's heart. No child should be so versed in survival tactics. We need to go back for Lucy, Emma said once they'd settled in. Richard will hurt her. Lucy can take care of herself, Grace responded, but her voice wavered. She survived worse. James, get your team to the soup kitchen, Maxwell ordered. Quietly, extract Lucy if you can, but no engagement with Richard's men. We need to play this smart. As James stepped out to make calls, Maxwell sat with the girls in the small living room. There's more you need to know, he said quietly. About your mother and Sarah and why everything happened the way it did. We know why, Emma said bitterly. Richard wanted power, money, control. No, Maxwell shook his head. It goes deeper than that. The video wasn't finished. Sarah said something else just before we had to run. Something about a company called Phoenix Holdings. The twins exchanged looks. We've never heard of it. I have, Maxwell said grimly. It was a shell company Richard used for his illegal dealings. But Sarah's video suggested it was more than that. She said it was the key to everything, including why your mother really died. Before he could continue, James burst back into the room, his face ashen. Sir, the soup kitchen, it's on fire. The twins leaped to their feet in unison. Lucy, my team is en route, but the whole block is cordoned off. Fire department says it started in the kitchen, spread to the offices. They found a body. Emma screamed, the first time Maxwell had heard either twin make such a vulnerable sound. Grace caught her sister as she crumpled, both girls folding to the floor in shared agony. Maxwell's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to me. The girls, the drive, all of it. You have 1 hour to deliver them to the Chelsea hotel. After that, more people will burn, starting with your board of directors. As he stared at the message, another text came through. This one contained a single image, the USB drive, held in a gloved hand, intact but covered in soot. The drive hadn't burned with Lucy, which meant, "It's a trap," he said quietly. "Lucy isn't dead. Richard has her, and the drive." The twins looked up, tear-streaked faces hardening with determination. "Then we have to get them both back," they said in unison. But as Maxwell looked at their young faces, so like Sarah's in their determination, he knew the next few hours would test them all in ways they couldn't imagine. And not everyone would survive the night. The safe house felt like it was closing in around them as Maxwell paced the small living room. James had stationed his most trusted men around the perimeter, but the knowledge that Richard had Lucy, and the drive, made every shadow seem threatening. "We can't just leave her there," Emma said, her voice hoarse from crying. She and Grace sat huddled together on the worn couch, looking younger and more vulnerable than ever. "We won't," Maxwell assured her, though his mind raced with the impossibility of their situation. "But we need to be smart about this. Richard's expecting us to act rashly." Grace lifted her head from her sister's shoulder. "There's something you need to see first." She pulled a crumpled envelope from inside her jacket. "Lucy gave us this months ago. Said if anything ever happened to her, we should open it." Maxwell took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. The paper contained an address in Red Hook and a series of numbers that looked like coordinates. "It's a storage unit," Grace explained. "Lucy said it contained everything we'd need if things went wrong, but we could never afford to get there safely." James studied the address. "I know that area. It's isolated, especially at night. Could be dangerous." "Everything's dangerous now," Emma said quietly. "Lucy risked her life for that drive. We have to know what's on it that's worth dying for." Maxwell's phone buzzed again, another message from Richard. 40 minutes left. The clock is ticking, and so is the timer on the device I left in your company's server room." "He's bluffing," James said immediately. "The building's security is top-notch." "Check," Maxwell ordered. As James stepped away to make calls, Maxwell turned back to the twins. "Tell me about Phoenix Holdings. What do you remember about your mother's research?" The girls exchanged one of their silent looks before Emma spoke. "Mom used to work late, going through old files. One night we heard her crying. She was on the phone with Sarah saying something about how it wasn't just money laundering anymore, that they were hurting people. The next day," Grace continued, "she told us we might have to leave quickly, gave us each a locket with Sarah's picture and made us memorize a phone number, said if anything happened to her, we should call it. Sarah's private line," Maxwell realized, "the one only I knew about." A horrible thought struck him. "Did Richard know you had that number?" "No," Emma shook her head. "We were too scared to use it at first. By the time we did—" "Sarah was already dead," Grace finished, her voice breaking. James returned, his face grim. "Security confirmed a breach in the server room. Small device professionally placed. Bomb squad's en route, but evacuation is already underway." Maxwell felt the weight of lives in his hands. Lucy, his employees, these innocent girls who'd lost everything. "We need what's in that storage unit. Now." The drive to Red Hook was tense, taking back streets and switching cars twice to evade potential tails. The twins huddled in the back seat of the latest vehicle, a nondescript sedan, while James drove and Maxwell watched for pursuers. The storage facility loomed ahead, a maze of identical metal units stretching into the darkness. Lucy's key opened Unit 247, revealing a space barely larger than a closet. Inside, Maxwell's flashlight beam revealed a single metal briefcase. The combination lock yielded to the coordinates from Lucy's note. Inside, they found another USB drive, a handgun, and a thick manila envelope labeled Insurance. Emma pulled out the contents of the envelope, photographs, documents, and a letter in Lucy's handwriting. As she read it aloud, her hands began to shake. Dear girls, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or in their custody. The truth is, I was never just a soup kitchen worker. Your mother Claire was my partner at the FBI before she went undercover to investigate Phoenix Holdings. When she died, I promised to watch over you. Maxwell felt the world tilt as Lucy's true identity emerged through her words. She'd been a federal agent all along, maintaining her cover for years, protecting the twins while gathering evidence. Phoenix Holdings isn't just a shell company, the letter continued. It's a front for something much worse. Richard and his partners have been using the company to facilitate human trafficking under the guise of private security contracts. Claire discovered this. It's what got her killed. Grace reached for her sister's hand as Emma's voice cracked on the next lines. Sarah found proof in the company records, documentation of payments, transport routes, everything. She was going to expose it all. That's why Richard couldn't risk letting her live. James's phone chirped, a message from his team at Thompson Enterprises. Bomb's been disabled, sir, but there's something else. The device had a serial number matching Phoenix Holdings' security equipment. 20 minutes. Maxwell's phone displayed Richard's latest message. Along with it came a photo of Lucy, bound to a chair in what looked like a hotel room. She was conscious, her face bruised, but her eyes defiant. He'll kill her, Emma whispered. Just like Mom, just like Sarah. No, Maxwell said firmly, picking up the gun from the briefcase. Not this time. Sarah died protecting you, protecting the truth about what these men have done. I won't let her sacrifice be in vain. We're going with you, Grace stated, her young face set with determination that matched her sister's. Absolutely not, Maxwell began, but Emma cut him off. We know things you don't, about the hotel, about Richard's habits, and we can get into places adults can't. You need us. Before Maxwell could argue further, a new message appeared on his phone. This one contained a video clip that made his blood run cold. The footage showed Sarah's car on that rainy night 5 years ago, but from an angle he'd never seen before. The crash hadn't been an accident at all. A second vehicle was clearly visible, forcing her off the road. New deal, Richard's message read. Come alone to the hotel, or this footage goes public, along with proof that you knew about the Phoenix Holdings operation all along. Your choice, old friend. Your reputation, your company, your freedom. Or Sarah's precious nieces. Maxwell stared at the twins. These brave, damaged girls who had suffered so much yet refused to break. He thought of Sarah, of Claire, of Lucy, women who had died or risked death to protect them and expose the truth. He knew what he had to do. But as he formed his plan, he prayed he wasn't about to add more names to the list of lives destroyed by Richard Blackwood's ambition. The Chelsea Hotel loomed before them, its historic facade hiding untold secrets. Maxwell sat in the car across the street, studying the building while the twins whispered urgently beside him. Despite his protests, they had refused to stay behind at the safe house. Room 512, Emma said, her voice steady despite her fear. That's where he always stayed when he was angry with Mom, said it was his lucky number. The service entrance is in the alley, Grace added. There's a broken camera. That's how we used to sneak out when... She trailed off, but Maxwell understood. More pieces of their traumatic childhood, more evidence of Richard's cruelty. His grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Sir, James spoke from the passenger seat, my team is in position. But if Richard sees anyone but you, he'll kill Lucy, Maxwell finished. I know. He turned to the twins. This is too dangerous. I can't let you... We're not asking permission, Emma interrupted. Sarah died protecting us. Lucy might die protecting us. We won't hide anymore. Grace pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper covered in Lucy's handwriting. She gave us this the day we found her at the soup kitchen. Said to memorize it, then burn it. We didn't burn it. Maxwell took the paper with trembling hands. It contained a series of numbers and letters, account passwords, security codes, safe combinations, all belonging to Phoenix Holdings. Lucy was building a case, Grace explained. She needed someone on the inside, someone with access. That's why she helped us find you. But she needed Richard to expose himself, Emma continued. To make a mistake. That's what tonight is really about. Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying Lucy planned this, all of it? The twins nodded in unison. She knew Richard would come himself if he thought he could get both us and the drive, Grace said. Knew he'd be desperate enough to make threats, leave evidence. The bomb at your company, Emma added. The video of Sarah's murder. He's giving us everything we need to destroy him. At the cost of her own life, Maxwell said grimly. Maybe not. Grace pulled out her phone, showing a messaging app Maxwell didn't recognize. Lucy has friends, people who've been watching, waiting. They just need proof of Richard's location, proof of what he's doing. A text appeared on Maxwell's phone. 10 minutes. Come up the main entrance, alone, or Lucy burns like the others. James checked his weapon one last time. Sir, if you're going in there, I'm going, Maxwell said firmly. But first, he turned to the twins. I need you to tell me everything. Every detail about room 512, about Richard's habits, about anything that might help keep us alive. The girls spoke quickly, painting a picture of the room's layout, of Richard's paranoid security measures, of the ways he'd torment them during their captivity. Each word fueled Maxwell's determination to end this tonight. There's something else, Emma said hesitantly. Something we never told anyone, not even Lucy. She reached into her coat and withdrew a small object that made Maxwell's breath catch, a key card marked with the Phoenix Holdings logo. Mum gave it to us the night she died, Grace explained. Said it would open any door in any Phoenix building. We never knew why she had it, but it's executive access, Maxwell realized. Claire must have taken it from Richard. That's why he killed her, not just because she knew too much, but because without this, he couldn't access his own secure facilities, Emma finished. Couldn't move his cargo without raising flags in the system. Another text, 5 minutes, tick-tock. Maxwell took a deep breath, memorizing the faces of these brave girls who had endured so much. Stay with James. If anything happens to me... No, they said together. We're coming with you. Like hell you are, he started, but Emma cut him off. Richard will be watching every entrance. But there's another way in. Through the old service tunnels. We can get to room 512 before you do. Be ready. It's too dangerous, Maxwell protested, but he saw in their eyes the same determination he'd seen in Sarah's. They would find a way with or without his blessing. Sir, James said quietly, let them help. My team can cover the tunnels, and having them inside might be our only advantage. Maxwell closed his eyes, hearing Sarah's voice from the video. Our girls are stronger than anyone knows. When he opened them, his decision was made. 2 minutes to get in position, he said. Then I walked through the front door. The twins slipped out of the car like shadows, disappearing into the alley with 2 of James's most trusted men. Maxwell watched them go, praying he wasn't sending them to their deaths. His phone buzzed one final time. The message contained a photo of Lucy, now gagged and bleeding from a fresh cut on her forehead. Behind her, visible in the mirror, stood Richard, holding a gun to her head. Time's up, old friend, the text read. Come say goodbye. Maxwell stepped out of the car, straightened his tie, and walked toward the hotel entrance. In his pocket, his hand closed around Sarah's locket, the twin to the ones the girls wore. Inside was a microchip Lucy had given them, containing everything needed to bring down Phoenix Holdings. All he had to do was get to room 512 alive, and pray the twins' plan, whatever it was, would work. But as he pushed through the revolving door, he couldn't shake the feeling that not everyone would survive the next hour. The only question was, who would be making the ultimate sacrifice this time? The Chelsea Hotel's lobby felt like a tomb, empty except for a drowsy night clerk who barely glanced up as Maxwell crossed to the elevators. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation 5 years in the making. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime. As he watched the numbers climb, Maxwell's mind raced through everything the twins had told him about room 512, corner unit, 2 exits, main door and service entrance. Windows overlooking 23rd Street. Richard always kept the desk between himself and the door, always had an escape route planned. His phone buzzed. Smart man, coming alone. Sarah wasn't so smart. She thought she could save everyone. Maxwell's hands clenched into fists. He forced them to relax, remembering Emma's warning. He'll try to make you angry, make you sloppy. That's when he strikes. The elevator stopped at the 5th floor. Maxwell stepped out into a dimly lit hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Room 512 waited at the far end, light spilling from beneath the door. "Come in slowly," Richard's voice called as Maxwell approached. "Hands where I can see them." Maxwell pushed the door open. The room was larger than he'd expected, dominated by a massive desk. Behind it stood Richard Blackwood, looking exactly as he had at Sarah's funeral, perfectly groomed, expensive suit, cold eyes. He held a gun casually against Lucy's temple. "Close the door," Richard ordered. Maxwell complied, noting Lucy's condition. She was conscious but battered, dried blood caking one side of her face. Her eyes, though, burned with the same determination he'd seen in the twins. "You've lost weight, Max," Richard said conversationally. "Grief doesn't suit you, though I must say, discovering my girls has put some life back in your eyes." "They were never your girls," Maxwell replied quietly. "Just like Phoenix Holdings was never really yours." Something flickered in Richard's expression. Surprise, fear. "Careful, old friend. You're in dangerous territory. Claire figured it out, didn't she? That's why you killed her. Phoenix wasn't your operation. You were just the front man. The real owners needed someone with legitimate business credentials." "Shut up," Richard snapped, pressing the gun harder against Lucy's head. "That's why you needed the keycard back so desperately. Without it, you couldn't prove your worth to them. Couldn't access the secure facilities, started losing their trust." "I said shut up." Richard's composure cracked. "You have no idea what you're talking about, the things they can do, the reach they have." "Tell me then," Maxwell pressed, taking a careful step forward. "Tell me why my wife had to die." Richard's laugh was harsh. Sarah died because she couldn't mind her own business, just like Claire, just like this one." He shook Lucy roughly. "Women, always thinking they can fix everything, save everyone. But you can't save anyone, Max. Not Lucy. Not the girls. No one." "Maybe," Maxwell conceded, "but I can make sure everyone knows the truth. About Phoenix, about Claire, about Sarah. It's all coming out, Richard. Tonight." "You think I care about exposure?" Richard sneered. "By the time anyone acts on that information, I'll be gone. New name, new life. I've done it before." "Not this time." Maxwell held up his phone, showing the messaging app Grace had revealed. "Every word of this conversation is being streamed to Lucy's FBI colleagues. They're just waiting for you to say something incriminating, which you just did." Richard's face contorted with rage. He swung the gun toward Maxwell, and in that instant several things happened at once. Lucy drove her head backward, catching Richard's chin. The gun went off, the bullet shattering a window, and from the service entrance behind the desk, 2 small figures burst into the room. Emma and Grace moved with the same fluid coordination they'd shown in the alley, but this time Maxwell saw the purpose behind their movements. Emma went low, sweeping Richard's legs as he staggered. Grace went high, knocking the gun from his grip with a move that spoke of years of practice. "You taught us well, Daddy," Emma said, her voice cold. "All those self-defense lessons, all that training for when we joined the family business. We know everything," Grace added, retrieving the gun with practiced ease. "About Phoenix, about the trafficking, about Mom, about Sarah." Richard lunged for Grace, but Lucy, now free, slammed him back against the desk. "Federal agent," she said, finally dropping her years-long act. "You're under arrest." But Richard wasn't finished. His hand darted beneath the desk, emerging with a second gun. "You think I didn't plan for this?" he snarled. "You think I don't always have a backup?" He fired twice. Lucy spun away, blood blooming on her shoulder. Maxwell dove for the twins, but they were already moving, synchronized as always. Yet this time, their perfect coordination worked against them. As they shifted to avoid Richard's aim, they collided. Emma stumbled. Grace reached for her sister, and Richard smiled. The next shot seemed to happen in slow motion. Maxwell saw Richard's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the twins frozen in their moment of vulnerability, saw Lucy struggling to raise her weapon with her injured arm. He didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. The impact felt like fire, burning through his chest. He heard screaming. The twins, Lucy, maybe even Richard. But above it all, he heard Sarah's voice from the video. "Protect our girls." As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, Maxwell saw two small faces hovering over him, tears falling like rain. Behind them, more shots rang out. Someone was shouting, "FBI, drop your weapon!" But none of that mattered. Only the girls mattered. Sarah's nieces, Claire's daughters. His last thought before consciousness fled was a silent promise to both Sarah and Claire. Their girls would be safe now, no matter what it cost him. The steady beep of hospital monitors was the first thing Maxwell heard when he finally regained consciousness. Everything hurt, but the pain told him he was alive. As his vision cleared, he made out two small figures curled up in chairs beside his bed, holding hands, even in sleep. "They haven't left your side for 3 days," Lucy's voice came from nearby. He turned his head slightly to see her in a wheelchair, her shoulder heavily bandaged. The doctors tried to make them go to the children's ward, but she shrugged her good shoulder. "They can be quite persuasive when they want to be." "Richard," Maxwell's voice was barely a whisper. "Dead." Lucy's tone was flat. "He tried to shoot the girls again after you went down. My team had no choice." Maxwell closed his eyes, feeling no satisfaction, only a deep weariness. "The evidence? Safe. Everything was on that drive, and more. The FBI has enough to dismantle Phoenix Holdings completely. We've already rescued 38 trafficking victims from their facilities. Arrests are still ongoing." A small sound made Maxwell open his eyes again. Emma and Grace were awake, watching him with identical expressions of concern and hope. "You saved us," Emma said softly, "just like Sarah did." "No one ever did that before," Grace added. "Not even—" She trailed off, but Maxwell understood. Not even their father had ever put their safety before his own. "I promised Sarah," he replied, his voice stronger now. "In that video, she made me promise to protect you both, to give you the life she and Claire wanted for you." Lucy wheeled closer to his bed. "About that, there's something you should know." She pulled an envelope from her jacket, another one of Sarah's letters. "This was in my FBI case file. Sarah left it there the day before she died." Maxwell took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Sarah's elegant handwriting filling both sides. "My dearest Max," it began. "If you're reading this, then everything has happened as I feared it would. Richard discovered what Claire and I were planning, to expose Phoenix Holdings and get the girls to safety. He'll try to stop us, and he may succeed. But what he doesn't know is that I've already taken steps to ensure the girls will be protected, no matter what. The day Claire died, she made me promise something. Not just to watch over her daughters, but to make sure they would have a real family if anything happened to both of us. That's why I started the adoption paperwork, Max. In your name." Maxwell's breath caught. He looked up at Lucy, who nodded. "It's legal," she confirmed. "Sarah filed it secretly, used her connections to fast-track it. If you want it, you're already officially their guardian." The twins sat up straighter, hope and fear warring in their expressions. "But that's not all," Lucy continued. "Sarah left something else, something that changes everything." She pulled out her phone, showing Maxwell a bank statement. The numbers made his eyes widen. Claire wasn't just gathering evidence, Lucy explained. She was tracking Phoenix's money. Before she died, she managed to transfer millions from their accounts, all the proof of their illegal activities encoded in the transfer records. She hid it in a trust fund, one that only activates when the girls turn 18. More than enough to secure their future, Maxwell said softly. To give them everything their mother wanted for them. Everything both their mothers wanted, Grace corrected quietly. Sarah was our mom too, in every way that mattered. Emma stood up, still holding her sister's hand. But what about you? Do you want us? Maxwell looked at these two remarkable girls who had survived so much, who had shown such courage, such resilience, who had lost everyone who ever tried to protect them. I want you more than anything, he said, his voice thick with emotion, if you'll have me. The twins moved as one, carefully embracing him despite his injuries. For the first time since Sarah's death, Maxwell felt truly alive. 6 months later, Maxwell stood in the garden of his penthouse, watching the twins plant flowers in memory of Sarah and Claire. Lucy, now fully recovered, sat nearby, officially their FBI protection, until the last of Phoenix's operators were caught. The girls had started school, real school, not Richard's special facility. They were thriving, their individual personalities emerging from behind the defensive walls they'd built. Emma was showing talent as a writer, while Grace had discovered a passion for art. Both were in therapy, dealing with their trauma day by day. Maxwell had stepped back from active management of his company, focusing instead on using his resources to help other trafficking victims. The trust fund Claire had hidden away was now a foundation in her and Sarah's names, dedicated to protecting vulnerable children. "Dad," Emma called from the garden, "we found something." He still wasn't used to them calling him that. It had started spontaneously about a month ago. Every time they said it, his heart swelled. The girls were kneeling by a rose bush, carefully brushing dirt from something buried beneath it. Maxwell's breath caught when he saw what it was, a small metal box, weathered but intact. "Sarah's favorite spot," he whispered. "She always said she did her best thinking here." Inside the box was a letter, dated just days before her death, and 3 identical silver lockets. The letter was brief but clear. "To my family, Max, Emma, and Grace. If you're reading this, then everything I hoped for has come true. You've found each other. The lockets are a match set. They only open when all 3 are together. Consider it my final gift to you, a reminder that love makes us stronger together than we ever could be apart. Emma, Grace, I'm sorry I couldn't save your mother, but I hope you'll understand now why I did everything I did. The truth you carry is important, but not as important as the love you deserve to have. Max, thank you for being exactly the man I always knew you were, for having the strength to open your heart again, for giving our girls the home they deserve. All my love, Sarah." The twins pressed their lockets together with Maxwell's. There was a tiny click, and all 3 sprang open. Inside each was the same photo, Sarah and Claire, as young girls, arms around each other, laughing at something long forgotten. "They look just like us," Grace whispered. "They look happy," Emma added. Maxwell pulled both girls close, feeling the weight of Sarah's final gift. She had known somehow that they would all need each other, that family could be built from broken pieces, stronger for having been rebuilt. "Dad," Grace asked softly, "will you tell us about her, about both of them?" Maxwell looked at his daughters, because that's what they truly were now, and smiled through his tears. "I'll tell you everything," he promised. "We have all the time in the world." In the garden, the roses Sarah had planted continued to bloom, season after season. And in the home she had helped create, love continued to grow, healing wounds and building bridges across the gaps left by loss. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would always be scars, always be memories that hurt. But it was a true ending, one earned through sacrifice, courage, and the unshakable bonds of family, just as Sarah had known it would be, all along.